and welcome to the M.B.Om podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. M.B.Om is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at M.B.Om, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hey friends, I just wanted to pop in and talk a little bit about M.B.Om behind the scenes. When I entered the yoga world as a teacher, I was surprised by how many yoga teachers were struggling with the business side of yoga. And that's why I created M.B.Om. M.B.Om helps yoga teachers and studio owners become entrepreneurs. It helps you to go from surviving to thriving with your yoga business. I am on a mission to change the yoga industry, to teach yoga teachers and studio owners about the business of yoga, and to help you feel more confident, successful, and abundant. After releasing hundreds of podcast episodes, I want to create content that dives deeper into helping yoga entrepreneurs thrive and elevate their businesses. This is where M.B.Om Behind the Scenes comes in. Each week, you will get bonus content from the weekly guest or myself, diving deeper into how you can take the teachings and apply them to your business. This podcast is designed for yoga teachers and studio owners who are ready to take it to the next level. If you enjoy M.B.Om and have been looking for an affordable way to learn more, this is it. For the cost of 2 lattes per month, you will get never-before-heard content that you can't access anywhere else that will give you tangible ways to dive deeper into your yoga business. If this sounds like something you're interested in, let's dive in. Head on over to patreon.com/M.B.Om Yoga and sign up to get behind the scenes now. Once again, that's patreon.com/M.B.O.M Yoga to get all the exclusive behind the scenes content. I'll see you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the M.B.Om podcast. I'm so excited that you're joining me for today's episode of the show. We're going to dive into some really good stuff in today's episode. But before we get there, I just wanted to give a shout out to the sponsor of M.B.Om, which is OfferingTree. OfferingTree is an all-in-one, easy-to-use online business platform that I've been working with for years, and I've continued to work with them because I genuinely love their products and their service. So if you're looking to save time, energy, and money, check out OfferingTree, and don't forget to grab your special discount at offeringtree.com/M.B.Om. I'm going to be talking about OfferingTree a little bit more later on in the episode, but for now, let's dive into today's episode of the show. This week on the podcast, I am excited to be joined by Michelle Cooper. Michelle is the CEO of Alchemy Accounting and Bookkeeping. She's an expert in accounting, profit, and cash flow. And so in this episode of the show, we're talking all about money. We're talking about the importance of getting clear on your revenue and your expenses, why it's important to separate your business and personal income and expenses, as well as how to get started doing this. And then we also dive into some of Michelle's top tips for having a good relationship with money and finances. So this is a topic that I feel like always stirs a little bit up for myself. Just talking about money, learning about money always gets, my head and my heart kind of going a little bit. But I found myself coming away from this episode just feeling re-inspired to look at my income and expenses and make sure that everything's organized, that I have good systems in place. So hopefully you can leave this episode feeling equally as inspired. And without further ado, let's get into it. Here is Michelle. Welcome to the podcast today, Michelle. I'm really excited to have you here with me.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk to you today and to share a little bit of this message about money and shame.
Yeah, it's an important message, and I'm really excited to dive into it and just really learn from you as well. But before we do that, can you just take a moment to introduce yourself to listeners, tell people a little bit about yourself and your background with this?
Yeah, of course. So I live on the west coast of Canada, and it's 11 years ago now, I found myself after spending 12 years living outside of Canada, traveling, um, back in Canada with 3 little children and a husband. And I had spent most of my life working in corporate finance. So although I lived a kind of a traveler's kind of lifestyle, I was working in corporate America, corporate Europe, or for companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, Citibank, working in strategic growth. So a lot of analysis. Um, I had gone through university and become a CPA, and uh, and when I found myself back in my hometown, connecting with friends who now had businesses and were struggling to figure out why they didn't have any money in the bank, I ended up helping them with what started out, compliance work, turning in tax returns and bookkeeping and stuff like that. Yeah, and then moving more into analysis of profitability, helping them really understand the numbers. And what happened to me was that I became really busy doing this and kind of accidentally built a business. And as that business grew, I was ignoring my own numbers. And I realized through some personal development work that I had been carrying a lot of shame about money, past mistakes, how I had treated money, my view of what money meant, and that was coming to terms with that is what really helped me create a different relationship with money and create the life that I wanted to create, which money is a part of, right? So the work I do with people is, I'm the founder and owner of Alchemy Accounting and Bookkeeping, which we do a lot of compliance work, helping people have accurate, detailed financial records. More importantly, what we're doing, like our mission in the world, is to help people change the trajectory of their wealth through entrepreneurship. And a huge part of that is looking at where they're carrying shame around money and finances.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I think that this is such an important topic just in general, but especially in the yoga space. And I think one of the things that I've shared on the podcast with listeners before around my own kind of relationship with money and story with money has been that growing up, I was taught not to talk about money. And so when I got into, my first corporate job after university, and it comes to like, well, how much do you want to get paid, or how much do you want for this raise, or what's your expectation, I was just super uncomfortable because I'd been taught my whole life like, we don't talk about money publicly. And I don't think that was necessarily like my parents' intention. I think they were trying more like, don't rock the boat in public by saying like, oh, I make $150,000 a year, or like I only make $40,000 a year, or something like that. But it kind of ended up in this place where like anytime money came up, I felt uncomfortable with it. Can we dive into a little bit around sort of how like money gets this stigma and shame, and how it feeds into our lives, especially as business owners?
Yeah, well, what it really comes down to is that we make money mean something, and then we interact with it and we walk through life with that meaning attached to money. So it might mean if somebody makes $150,000 a year, for some people that might mean that and they say that out loud. It might mean that they're bragging or they're arrogant, right? Or if somebody makes $40,000 a year, somebody might create a meaning that is, oh, poor them. Oh, they must be suffering. And we create this meaning behind money for ourselves and for everyone around us. And I see this all the time. Like we work with coaches and consultants and practitioners in Alchemy. Like a big part of those people are yoga, um, anything to do with yoga, really. And that community has a conflict often between the spiritual connection that yoga can provide them and making money from that. And I see it
Yeah.
over and over again, right? Like that this is something like they've adopted this meaning that money is if they take money for this, it somehow distorts the value of the spiritual connection or of the soul work of it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, absolutely.
and that
I hear the same thing too, Michelle, for sure.
yeah, and that ends up with people in suffering. And so it's actually a contradiction to everything that yoga stands for. I just find it really interesting. Like Brene Brown is like the queen of understanding shame. And I was so glad when she came out and, really started to educate the world on shame and how it affects us, right? Because it lowers our frequency, right? It's like I always say, like, it's like carrying a lead backpack. It weighs you down. You can't get it, a lot of people can't get out from under it.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that in some ways personally, and then also really relate from, different conversations I've had with people in my own business and that type of thing. And I'd love to dive into a little bit around, you know, some of these how this finance shame and how this money shame can be holding us back. And I think that often when we get into business, we start as like an individual that's like, doing something maybe as a side hustle, maybe part time. People start paying for us, paying us for it. And then we get in this situation where we're like, oh, I need to kind of like legitify my business. And I know one thing that can make things a little bit tricky is like having your business finances in with your personal finances and that type of thing. Can we talk about that a little bit and just how that can impact us?
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, we start out, we're doing all the things. We're like an army of one kind of thing, right? And we're just doing whatever we're doing to do our work in the world and to bring in some money. And so we might not be very intentional about how we where money is coming in or going out of, right? And what I believe is there's this like sacred flow of money that happens, right? Because it is energy. We don't need to hoard it or like desperately hang on to it, right? That's a result of some kind of thinking. And we see this in alchemy all the time, where people start a business, they're sole proprietor, or sometimes they're not. Their business isn't even registered, and they're mixing their personal money and business money, and they don't understand why that's a problem. So we live in a world where paying taxes is a natural thing. It's a normal thing. It's part of how our society functions. And if you are a sole proprietor, any kind of business really, and you are filing tax returns and everything is all mixed together, should you ever be like reviewed or audited or an inquiry into your income or expenses, personal or business? If everything's mixed together, you're then opening up your entire life to the IRS or CRA or whoever your government is, right? And when we look at from a compliance place, when we look at things like reviews or audits or things like that, we want to give the government the information they're asking for. We don't need to give them more than they're asking for. And so if they're, say, reviewing I don't know, your meals and entertainment expenses for your business, and they want to see a bank statement to show that you've spent this money and it's all mixed in with your personal, well, now you're giving them personal information as well. And so it's like leaving breadcrumbs. And it's not about like you're not hiding anything, but you don't need to like open up your entire world to the government. You need to give them the
Hmm.
information they ask for. Now, that's the kind of like if we're wearing our kind of like compliance and really kind of dollars and cents 3D world hat, right? That's what can happen energetically. which I personally feel is more important, is that you become unclear as to what is the amount of money coming in, and what does it cost to generate that money. And it's not from a place of judgment, right? It's from a place of having information, because data um, gives us optics into what's going on, like profitability, right? And it starts when we see that really clearly, it starts to shift our relationship with that money and the flow of that money. A lot of people who come to us say, well, I'm not good with math. I don't like this. I don't want to do this piece. But when you start kind of breaking it apart a little bit and showing them the data that's sitting right there for them, they have really great optics on their business, and they can make better decisions. And the reason that's important, it's like layers, right? The reason that's important is because then they're not reactionary about money. Then they're in a
Mhm.
place of rest, repose, of relaxation, because they know the information and they can make powerful decisions, not reactionary, panic, frantic decisions about money. And that's
Mm.
the key.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I really like what you were talking about how, there's certain things that we have to do to stay in compliance with the government, and like why give them more than they need, like why open our whole lives to them. And I think, for me, that's like a pretty good thing to convince me to do things like to separate my business and whatnot, if the spiritual side didn't convince me, which I think that it's so interesting how like energetic this stuff can be in terms of when you do this work and you kind of look at how you feel about money, you can kind of shift like the direction and the flow of money in some ways. And I think the idea of being able to kind of be like, okay, so I've got this container for it, which is my business, and when I bring money in this way, it goes in this container and then this is how it goes out. It allows it to kind of be a little bit different in your mind than if you're just like, oh, I have money coming from here and from here. And, that birthday gift that my grandpa gave me is like going in the same bank account as my yoga student. It doesn't feel different energetically. And I know one thing that a lot of people I've talked to are like, well, does it make sense to separate my stuff out if I basically need everything I'm making to live? What are sort of your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Even if you get $1,000 in and you take $1,000 out, it makes sense. What you want to be able to see is how much money your business generated and from what sources, right? So if you're doing one-on-one classes or group classes or teacher training or whatever it is you're doing, right? Retreats, to separate that out so you can understand um, how much money is coming in from the different things that I do. And then you pay your business expenses out of that account, right? So you understand, okay, well, um, I have $1,000 in and I have $200 in expenses. So really, the money for me is $800, right? Because a lot of times, the big question for entrepreneurs is, I don't understand where all my money is. Like, can you help me find all of the money that I've made? And they don't like, they know they have expenses, but we're so focused. Our brain just focuses in on their income. And so it thinks, oh, $1,000. I have $1,000. Well, no, you actually have 800, right? And so that's where the money is, right? Like, you don't have $1,000 because you just spent $200 on whatever it was, right? Expenses. If we have everything mixed together, our brains are really good at focusing on that $1,000, right? That top line number, and forgetting all the rest, right? And and that's where people can sometimes end up in some problems, right? Where maybe they end up in like tax debt, or if they live in Canada, say, and they collect like goods and services tax, um, they'll end up spending that money because they're not like breaking it down a little bit, right? And it just needs to be crystal clear.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's nothing worse than not really knowing if you have enough money or not for
Right?
something. Like, that's definitely something that makes me feel stressed. And I went through so much of this when I first started working for myself, making not very much money. And I was like, okay, I'm just kind of freelancing, bringing money in. And then I think the first year that I made enough money to actually pay taxes, I was like, oh, damn, like I didn't prepare for this. Like I actually don't have that money like ready. And it's like, okay, I need to figure out how to separate this so I understand what's coming in, what's coming out. Because how are you supposed to like plan your year in terms of what do I launch this year? How many clients do I need? Can I hire something out? If you don't really understand how much is coming in and how much is coming out, like it just feels like you're kind of in this sort of stagnant, almost like hamster wheel situation if you're not really clear on what's coming in and what's coming out. And despite the fact that like I have a business degree and I love the business of yoga, this side of it is not my forte at all. It's not my expertise. And it's something that I like to avoid in my business too. But I've definitely found like doing this work and doing it kind of ahead of time can be so much more beneficial in terms of just feeling that like yeah kind of that calmness in your mind and as opposed to that chaos.
For sure, for sure. And you know, like your experience is not unusual, right? Like even, and this is where some shame can like trickle in, right? Where we do have education, we do have experience, and then we also at the same time choose to ignore this in our own business, right? And that was my part of my story, right? Like I was so busy helping other people that all of a sudden I wondered if I was going to have enough money to make payroll. I didn't have any room on credit cards. I had accumulated like $65,000 in debt through investment in my business, but I wasn't paying attention, right? And things just start to like speed up. And what I find for myself and for a lot of my clients who they're making some good money, the cash flow kind of hides the non-profitability of their business. They get this money coming in and there's always just enough. And so they don't realize that they're actually not profitable.
Right. Right. And that's obviously not super ideal. I don't think anyone listening is like, I want to run a non-profitable business.
Right? Yeah.
Can you imagine? So I know we've talked about like separating the finances and then a little bit about this kind of idea of like not understanding your profitability. What other like quote unquote dirty secrets do you find that like a lot of business owners have?
Oh my God, such a good question. Well, there's what you mentioned, where they start to make some money and they're spending all of their money and not thinking ahead and having money allocated for, say, tax, or people who start to build teams and have employees and they forget about the payroll remittance and they end up going into debt to the government. Those situations are definitely things that people don't want to talk about because they feel guilty. Actually, going into a lot of debt, credit card debt. Now, I'm not against debt, right? Like, I'm not one of those people who's like, if you don't have the money, you shouldn't spend it, because I firmly believe in investing in your business and investing in your personal development, but doing it intentional and understanding the the financials around it, right? So people can get on the, I don't know what I call like the personal or business development carousel, buying one course after another or one thing after another. And usually that comes from a place of not enough, right? Like I got to learn more. I got to be more. I got to do this next thing. I got to learn how to build this other funnel or whatever it is, right? And they just keep spending, and they're not utilizing what they've already purchased, and they're going on to purchase something else. And they're doing it with a credit card. And then, just like me, they end up on it at a day where you've got no room on your credit card, and you realize when you add them all up, you're 50, 60, $70,000 in debt. And the outward appearance of you as a business owner can look like you've got your shit together, basically, right? And people don't want to say, oh, you know what, I screwed up. But that's actually what's happened, right? And I've learned to not judge myself on that, right? Like, it is what it is. It happened, and I can make some changes. I think in the world that we live in right now, there's a huge focus on revenue generation. And you see it all over the place, right? The 10x your business, a six-figure launch, or I don't know, all these things that happen, and like in the online space. Um, and it's, you need revenue. If you don't have revenue, you don't have a business. However, what I feel is more important is the amount of money you actually keep in your pocket, right? The profit. That's the important number. Because I see over and over again people who do 6, 7, 8-figure launches, and these are my clients, and they end up with $20,000, $30,000. Like, they end up with nothing because it costs so much to generate that level of revenue. Whereas they could just go out and get a couple of clients and make the same amount of money. So
it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, like there's this, maybe it's ego based. I need to have this big thing going on to feel successful. But that really is, that's just from a place of like outward appearance, right? I've got some clients right now who work with a handful of people, and they're making 7 figures, right? So, and they're keeping most of it because it doesn't cost as much to do that level of business. So, if there's a dirty little secret kind of thing, it's to look at what you're doing with your business, how you're bringing money in, where it's being spent, and what do you actually want, right? Because there's different ways to have what you want.
Hey everyone, we're just taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about OfferingTree. I wanted to remind you about the special discount you can get with OfferingTree. I love telling yoga teachers about OfferingTree because not only is it your one-stop shop for all things that you need in your yoga business, but it is also easy to use, it's affordable, and it's truly an amazing company to work with. OfferingTree lets you sell courses, run classes, manage memberships, and so much more with just one account. That's right, just one login for all those parts of your business. One of the best parts about OfferingTree is their online store. You can sell digital content like yoga videos, challenges, and courses right from your website. If you're teaching yoga classes and looking to level up, selling digital content is the next step to growing your business. Over the last year, we've seen so much pivot and change happen in the yoga industry, and having your own unique yoga business where you offer your students different course material can be so beneficial in creating a sustainable business with diversified income. And while there's many different platforms that you can create courses on these days, OfferingTree's course tools are easy to use and they're really affordable. And if you have a website you already like, you can still use OfferingTree. But there's one other thing I want to tell you about OfferingTree that makes all the difference in the world to me and probably to you too. They're a company that truly cares about yoga teachers and the wellness industry overall. I chose to partner with OfferingTree because I love the product and I love the people. Whenever yoga teachers have a suggestion for something that they need out of the platform, they can reach out directly to the people at OfferingTree and they're actually heard. So much of the development that OfferingTree has gone through over the last year has been because of yoga teachers like yourself. So if you're looking to save time, energy, and money in your yoga business, OfferingTree is hands down the software for you. Go to offeringtree.com/M.B.Om to learn more and get your discount. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Yeah, that's really good stuff. So thank you for sharing that. And I think too, it's kind of coming back to this whole conversation of shame, right? Because I think that for a lot of us, we're not taught like, how do you actually run a business? We're not taught these types of things. And so we go into it, we end up in a situation where we haven't separated things out, or we've gotten into some credit card debt. And then, we need to kind of keep that facade going on the outside so that people don't realize what's going on the inside, because, getting more clients, getting more revenue in is the only way we're going to save our business. But then it kind of ends up in this like, the shameful thing. Like you don't want to talk with your like peers or your mastermind buddies or your family, your parents about how like, you weren't watching your cash flow come in and out and now you have thousands of dollars of debt. So I guess my question is like, how do we get out of these situations and how do we stop kind of this cycle of shame?
Yeah, so good. Because nobody wants to talk about it. It's like I always say, like, I joke with my friends, like, who wants to talk to the money shame lady? Like, nobody really wants to do that, right? It's not a conversation you're lining up to have. But at the same time, we can we can make a decision that we're going to change our relationship with money. And there's a couple components there, right? There's the practical dollars and cents. If you're mixing your money with your personal, just open a separate account. It doesn't even have to be like a business account. It could just be a separate checking account or a separate savings account. Make it at a different bank than your personal account, and just start depositing your business money in there, and then move your expenses to come out of there, right? Even if it's one by one, right? Just start making that separation. And if you need support on that, ask for support. Find good support. A bookkeeper, a really good bookkeeper, in my opinion, is such a valuable member of your team. Like so valuable. They can help you get clarity on your numbers, and they'll be able to tell you like, what your profitability is, what is the highest generating product or service that you offer. Like they're a wealth of information. So if you need help with it, if you're just like, I don't even know where to start, get help. It's also one of the cheapest ways for you to get an ROI on your time, because it can take, for people who this isn't their area of genius, it can take a lot of time of their time to figure it out, versus what you would pay a bookkeeper, and what you could make with charging for your time is vastly different. So it's a great ROI. It's one of the first team members people should think about having. Um, and then uh, set yourself up for success, right? Get clear on what the numbers are. What are you bringing in? What is it costing you to do business? How much debt do you have? And the biggest part of that is not having zero judgment, like no judgment on that. So I was talking to a client yesterday where I was like, okay, so here's what we're going to do, right? You are going to um, set the stage, right? So um, you want to put yourself in a powerful state of being, in a rest and relaxation state of being. So what is that? How do you feel relaxed? Well, I like to listen to music. I like to have my triple decaf mocha, blah 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 coffee. I like candles. Okay, so we're going to do all of that, and we're going to look we're going to log into the different credit cards you have, and you're just going to write out the balances. So we want to support ourselves. Just start changing how we interact with money.
Yeah,
And
I think
then
that that's
things
super
start to
important.
change. Yeah. Yeah. Because then things can start to change, right? If we just keep doing what we've been doing, it's a habitual pattern of behavior, right? And that's what got us to where we're at, which we probably want to be somewhere different.
Yeah, 100%. And if we end up in a situation where we kind of go through all of this, so we're separating, we're organizing, we're hiring somebody to help us with our bookkeeping, and we're realizing that we're not a profitable business, how do you start to turn that around? Because I would imagine for a lot of people, especially if you have, you know, this shame around your finances, that that's going to be a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, well, you might need some support in that through, a coach or even educating yourself with something like your podcast, right? Um, but what I see mostly is people don't charge enough. They just simply are not charging enough for their time and their services. Um, and this is like super prevalent are prevalent in the yoga sector space, um, any kind of like spiritual practitioner space. Uh, they undervalue their services. So it's often when I'm looking, like, new clients come in and they're like, "Can you tell me one thing I can do after you've looked at my numbers?" It's like, yeah, you can raise your price, right? Because you here's what it's costing you just to be in business, right? Just for your business to be open. This is what it costs, right? Here's what it costs for you to deliver these services. What's left for you? Nothing, right? Or very little. We got to look at increasing the price. Um, and you can do that when you have that information, right? And so the resistance that comes up is like the mindset, right? It's the thinking. And we can look at that as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that that is, it's a hard conversation to have. And I think there's also like, there can be a lot of fear around raising your prices. It's sort of like, well, I'm busy right now. People are paying this price. Will they pay something more? And I think the reality is that we really do have to value the services that we offer. And one thing I've seen a lot in the yoga industry over the last year, particularly, is so many people like lowering their prices because now their services are online. And it's making it really hard for people to actually make a sustainable living. And the other thing it's doing is causing people who have never done online yoga before to value online yoga as less than in-person yoga for whatever reason, even though it requires, more equipment, more skills, all of that type of stuff.
Right.
And it doesn't really make sense for us to be, lowering our prices just because we're doing something through Zoom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, because we have to look at the value that we're providing to people. And I don't know, like, the value of being able to do yoga in a pandemic, to me, there's even an increased value in this, world that we're living in right now, because, right, we know the benefits of yoga, right? And we know the benefits that relate to our immune system, even, right? And so it's like a paradox, right? Where people think, oh, well, we'll put it online, we'll make it cheaper because, I don't know, whatever the reasons are. But actually, it's even more value. So it's up to us as the practitioner, or the business owner, to communicate the value in ways that people understand that value, right? It's like having, like, it's like having, I don't know, your yoga instructor in your pocket, kind of thing, right? You can pull them out anytime. But what happens is we go to that place of not enough in our thinking, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and we make decisions about that, and then we shy away from communicating the real value that we're providing. Uh, and maybe there's other things you could add in that would help with, like, uh, help support people when we start with being of service and really getting clear on the impact that we're creating in somebody's life, right? Um, and understanding the value of that and owning it. Um, Raising our price doesn't become so difficult, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But
I love the way that you said that. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious if there's anything else you want to share today, Michelle, just around how we can just break down these barriers, sit down with our finances, be honest with ourselves, ask for help when we need it, separate everything out, treat ourselves like an actual business owner. Is there anything else that we've missed that you want to share?
well, I just think, like, don't be so hard on yourself. People are so hard on themselves, especially entrepreneurs. They're always like striving for, something more, and oh, I've done this wrong and I shouldn't have done that, and oh my God, I made this mistake. And, our brain has that negative bias that it's really easy for it to bring up all the crap that happened. Um, don't be so hard on yourself, and get help. Like, if this is something that you need support with, it's easy to get help. And that can include, say, a bookkeeper or a coach or a book you read, uh, a podcast you listen to. Right? Get some help. The main thing is to feel good about this area. And if you're not feeling good, you want to explore your resistance to feeling good.
Yeah, I think that that's super important is just diving into this kind of, I guess, like emotional, personal sort of experience. And like you said, if something's not feeling good, make sure that you're understanding why that is. And I think that this is just a side of business that for so many of us, we want to avoid. And in some ways, it's kind of easy to avoid. I mean, you can just go basically all year without looking at your numbers as long as you can, like, pay your staff if you
Totally.
have it and pay your bills, essentially, maybe use your credit cards a little bit or a line of credits, that type of thing. And then tax season comes and you can bear the consequences of whatever that is, whether or not you're breaking even or having to owe. And then you can just move on. And I think it does take like really intentional work to kind of look at that and say, like, okay, I don't like this thing, but I'm understanding that it's a part of of my business, and that I need to, in order to be a better business owner, be a better entrepreneur, really look at head on and see how I can live with it and kind of be, what's the word, like, just be like at peace with it and kind of live with it peacefully.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Right. It's the state of being. Like, to me, everything comes down to your state of being, right? The rest, repose, powerful state of being versus a fight, flight, freeze, panic, primal state of being. It
Mm-hmm.
makes a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. I really love that. And I think that here is a good place to wrap up. So, Michelle, I'm curious if you can share with listeners where they can go to find you today, if they want to check out your services, your resources, your business, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So our website is alchemyaccounting.ca. We are in Canada, but we support entrepreneurs across North America and quite a few expats living in Mexico and South America, especially the yoga community who love Mexico and Costa Rica and Peru and stuff like that. And they can find me on Facebook under Michelle Cooper or Alchemy Accounting, and on Instagram as Michelle B. Cooper.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Michelle.
Oh, thank you for having me. The work that your community does in the world is so important, and is really close to my heart. So I'm have such an honor and privilege to be able to talk to your community and to you today.
Amazing. Thank you for being a part of it. All right, friends, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the show with Michelle Cooper. Make sure you go and check her out for more resources and information on accounting and bookkeeping and money management. Michelle and I also continued this episode of the show on M.B.Om behind the scenes, talking about how to manage your cash flow. So we talked a little bit about like once you've got more revenue coming into your business, how do you manage this a little bit more strategically and with your systems? So if you're at a place where maybe you need like the next step up from what we were talking about today, I would definitely recommend this episode. And you can get access to that at patreon.com/MBOM yoga. Of course, I'd like to give a huge thank you to our sponsor, OfferingTree. To start spending more time with students and less time with software, head on over to OfferingTree.com/MBOM to get an exclusive discount. And of course, a huge thank you to you for listening to this episode of the show. I am so appreciative of your continued support through listening to the podcast and engaging with things like OfferingTree and behind the scenes and all of that good stuff. So thank you so much, and I will see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.